Hey everyone, welcome back to the AI in Action podcast. I'm your host, Mazor, Kario, product design and AI expert and the creator of the online leadership program, Unlocking the Power of Generative AI. And today we discuss AI's crucial role in cybersecurity and national defense. Our guest, Zac Staples, is the founder and CEO of Fathom5, the first company to deploy AI on U.S. Navy warships, shares his insight on security and securing critical systems. We'll explore AI's impact on industry, security, and future of defense technology. Hey, Zac.
Hey, Addie, how are you?
I'm happy to have you here. I'm sure it's going to be really interesting and fascinating, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on some of these subjects. So let's
Oh
start
yeah,
with
me too. It's good. It's great to be here, and hopefully, I think we'll have a lot more fun than reading that intro. Right? Reading the intro is always the boring part. It's going to get really interesting
Right.
after that.
Just talking about what the titles are is always much less important than just speaking to people, as I
Yeah.
know from this podcast. And I have already, I think, more than almost 170 episodes already, so I learned a bit about that. So why is AI becoming so crucial for modern defense systems?
Yeah, that's a great question, Addie. So AI is going to be absolutely essential to the future of national security systems. And the reason why is because the amount of data is going up. If we go back 50 years, you had a commander send a message to their senior or send a message to a subordinate, and his only censor of the battlefield was what got written back to them in a letter or a message. You can go back 200 years and you sent it was literally letters. Then we got to the point where we could transmit electronic messages, but
Yeah.
but
Before that,
the
we have, the fires with the Indians.
That's right. Before that, we had all sorts of visual signaling, and if you
Yeah,
believe Lord of the Rings, they put fires across mountains, right?
right, right.
But in all sincerity, the number of sensors that we have that are actually measuring what's going on in the world and trying to feed and inform national security decision making are just going through the roof. Right. And it's the same whether you're in manufacturing, it's the same whether you're in precision agriculture and you're trying to measure the nutrients in the water across, your entire vineyard. You can measure that with a lot more fidelity than you can before. But no one expects the farmer to go through and tabulate all of the data that all of these sensors are measuring, right? We expect some software to aggregate all that data and then present some sort of map that is designed for the human to think through. And then we want the farmer to make better decisions about using less pesticide and using less fertilizer and being more conservative with water, right? And by providing farmers great data and good visualization of that data, they're able to make better decisions to increase food and decrease inputs to do that. The Department of Defense is no different. And it's not just the U.S. Department of Defense. It's any national security organization has the ability to dramatically ramp up the amount of sensor data that's coming in. And in order to process and deal with all of that sensor data, you've got to have software to do that. And AI is fundamental to modern software because it's really about advanced statistical analysis and advanced statistical inferencing. And so when you have a bunch of measurements, AI is a great tool to help you think through what do all of those measurements mean in a more holistic way.
Yeah. I just read, it just reminds me that I think that I read it today, that there is a restrictions of the countries that the US would export their chips to. And I think they said it's related to the defense part of the equation, if I'm not mistaken. Did you see that?
Yeah, so the U.S. passed several laws over the last few years trying to figure out how to create a level playing field for this economic and geostrategic competition we find ourselves in a multipolar world, right? So if you go back, let's say 30 years ago to right after the fall of the Soviet Union, it was really kind of a U.S. hegemonic system. But now we're in a multipolar world. And in that multipolar world, it's clear that the Russians don't want to play by kind of the European set of norms. It's clear that there are some Middle Eastern nations that want to rebel against that set of norms. And it's clear that China wants to set their own new norms. And if the hardware element of the modern economy is going to be built around chips, well, then it makes sense for, in that multipolar world, to figure out a way to protect competitive advantage from people that may use that technology to start conflicts. And again, just kind of, we made the farmer analogy earlier about kind of the use of AI to process data. You can do the same thing from a kind of a macroeconomic perspective and say that in this multipolar world, there are geostrategic challenges between the United States, our longtime allies, and Russia and China are probably the two biggest other poles in that multipolar world. And in defense, as well as in commerce, access to the computing resources to build the world's most advanced technology is going to be, we're going to need to figure out how to make sure that goes right.
So I think that the biggest challenges for defense systems and in general in AI are the chips and the power needed, like the electricity and power that is needed. There is something else that is needed for defense other than these two aspects in order to succeed in AI?
Well, I would definitely say so. Yeah, there's a couple others, right? So right now in the commercial space, you see the rush is on to have access to high power GPUs and follow on kind of single purpose semiconductors. And then because the natural language models that people are really enamored with in the civilian world, the large language models everybody's pretty impressed by the last few years, they take a ton of power, right? And so everybody is now concerned about whether or not those huge models we're going to have enough power to power them. That's a concern on one trajectory. And the only concern that trajectory makes sense on is if what we've seen in the large language model world is actually the trajectory. So what I mean is, in the large language model world, we keep seeing better results as they train them on larger and larger GPU clusters through more, I'm going to use the word expensive, to kind of wrap up more time, more GPUs, and more power to run those GPUs for longer. Right?
Sure.
So we've seen this trajectory that says, well, if we keep doing more and more expensive models in those resource categories, we keep getting what feels like more generalized AI success. Maybe that trajectory works in the long run. But there are a lot of other folks out there with competing ideas that say that isn't the trajectory, that we're going to get to generalized AI on a couple of different angles. That's one. Two is those models aren't necessary to do a lot of the stuff that is useful in many other contexts. So one of the things I think, that is much smaller models can do, and much smaller models and can run, it takes a certain amount of energy and resources to train a model, and it takes a different number of energy and resources to run that model in production, right?
Sure. Right.
So early classifiers, if you go back before ChatGPT, we were all very impressed that Apple could find pictures divide up your pictures by your friends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And various things like that, right? So classifiers are really important to help sort through military data. Just to say, just things that can say, that's a house, that's a tree, there's a house under that tree. You know what I mean?
Sure.
In images, there's but there's tons and tons of other data where we're sorting through it, and we just want to say, has the side of that road been disturbed in the last, that is a road, that new hole on the ground there. Well, it's probably an IED next to that road in a war zone, right? And so the classifiers that we had before the large language models are still vitally important, and the question I think was directly is, are there other things besides chips and access to energy that are being important for defense? And the number one thing I would say is cybersecurity.
Yeah, sure. It makes sense, because I would say in general that these defense organizations would not use general models or third-party models, because they need to defend their data and what they're thinking of, and for sure somebody would want this data, their enemies, so they need to secure it really well.
I think we see every year new and creative ways that bad actors, even just talking, not even talking like nation state level cyber espionage activities, but just
Sure.
cyber crime activities. We
Sure.
see new and creative ways every year that the internet is exploited by cyber criminals. I literally got phishing email sent to me this morning, like spoof from one of my employees telling me they needed to change their bank routing number, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
so
I have a newsletter, and my latest one is like 2 posts about security and criminals with AI, using
yeah.
AI in order to do crimes. That's
So
it.
they're going to use, so what we've seen right over the last couple decades are new and creative ways that malicious actors are going to find creative ways to make the internet as we built it work for them. So no one should be surprised conceptually that as AI gets more important, and the output of models becomes more and more important in the way decisions get made, those same actors are going to try and find new and creative ways to make those models say what they want them to say versus what you
For
want
sure.
them to say, right?
Of
And
course.
to
Or
bias.
that you want to know what they know you.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we there has been for years legitimate concern about bias in AI models, right?
Sure.
If you're a malicious actor, you would start to think, well, wait a minute, how might I interject data into their training data so that the model comes out with a bias that actually is advantageous to me? But that is just one, that's not that creative. The malware community and nation state actors in that multipolar system are going to invest a lot of money in trying to figure out how to corrupt and pollute our decision support models.
Sure.
And so protecting our data, our training data, and the runtime environments and the training environments from the activities of those malicious actors all falls under that bubble of cybersecurity for AI. So it's not just network penetration testing and all of these other things. It's a whole new set of ideas that we have to think about. How do we protect the decision support tool development and runtime?
Yeah. I work a lot with startups, and I always tell them, like, in the last half a year, I always tell them, if I would have started a startup, and I wouldn't, but if I would have done it, it would be something related to AI and security for sure. Because all the creativity of people could go into just thinking about ways to disturb this system.
Yes.
It's like, virus and antivirus, it could be much more than that. So for sure, there will be so many new ways in order to do things with AI against AI. So why not?
Yeah, I think you're right. And, I mean, I think all of us have lots of like well-founded concerns about artificial intelligence and its impact on society and the trajectory it's going and everything else, right? If I have one hope for optimism in this whole process, it is that we take the security of the system seriously at the beginning. It was decades into our kind of the establishment of the internet, and the key, if you think about the internet, it was the establishment of the World Wide Web. Then it was the establishment of norms for e-commerce. And then it was kind of norms for how will we communicate with each other on the internet. It'll primarily be email. And then after that, it was the internet moved to our cell phones, right? Those four things, the underlying internet infrastructure, the way that internet traffic is routed, TCP/IP, the way e-commerce is secure, and the way we move to use all of those tools on our phones have stayed roughly conceptually the same for quite a while, right?
Yeah.
And then we started adding cyber kind of on top of each one of those pillars. It's kind of like icing on a pre-baked cake.
Yeah.
So my biggest point of optimism in the AI movement is that people already have that concern about cybersecurity now in 2025 that they didn't have 95.
Sure.
And so hopefully we'll see not AI cybersecurity companies, but we'll see cyber resilient design in AI companies. And I think it's a really important difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hope that you're right.
Yeah, right.
Many people have a dystopian view of AI in defense, like thinking about the Terminator style robots and autonomous weapons. And how do you see that actual practice of defense landscape changing with the AI revolution?
Yeah, I think I love that question. Whenever I talk about AI in defense, right, I always get the Terminator question.
Just
And I
think
love the
about one
movie.
movie which is so powerful,
I
right?
know, right? And it's like it's emblazoned in everybody, at least in our generation's like culture.
Sure.
It is, I get that question all the time, right? And it's a good question because it's a legitimate concern. I think first and foremost, I like to think about the market drivers. So the drivers of any particular market govern how products in that market are shaped to meet the market demand, right? And so I think there are some things about the defense market that are really fascinating and different from the commercial AI market that make it a better space in some regards to do this early AI development. And I still like to say early AI development. We are in the first, 15 years of the AI revolution. Really, you think, large language model, deep learning, when we're talking about deep learning, right? We were talking about that in 2012 as image recognizer, image classifiers started to get pretty good, right? So we're still in the first 15 years of the AI revolution. And if you think back to, the first 15 years of the, mass-produced automobile revolution, you were still at early Model Ts and Model As in that world,
Yeah.
in cars, right? So,
Yeah.
so you could not imagine a Ferrari then, like the way you
Yeah.
have it
Right.
now. So,
Right.
and so we're going to end up in a way different place than we are. And so the real question is, for me, is early in this, what are the good markets to develop this in so that we can do this in a way that's safe for the user and of this capability, right? So one of the first market for AI was in advertising targeting and content targeting. And we know now from Facebook's own records, for example, that content targeting has had a net negative impact, particularly on young people and specifically on young women, like globally. There have been great studies, both with both European American and Australian across the English speaking world that show that content targeting and focusing on eye screen capture time has been polarizing for society and bad for people's mental health, right? That's because the market dynamic right now in the commercial space really only pays for advertising. Like advertising is the only cost model right now that will fund this development. So that's why Microsoft was so interested in investing in OpenAI, because they knew that AI tools could put them back on the market against search, right?
Right.
And
Right.
that's why all of the big search engines have an AI product now. It's
Right.
because that, as well as all of, so those are all advertising driven business revenues. That's not going to change. And so what it's going to do, it's going to create a market dynamic to develop AI tools that squeeze more money out of a market that causes social harms. Go on the defense side. There is no commercial incentive. So
What?
there's no
That's
commercial,
strange. When you're
right?
saying,
So,
I could just imagine that, let's say, an enemy of the US would
yeah,
have these kinds of robots.
yes.
That's a good incentive.
So, but it's not a commercial incentive, right?
It's not commercial, but it's a good
Yeah.
incentive. It's a good
So
one.
that's right. So let's think about what are the incentives there and kind of compare and contrast, right? Centuries of warfare have shown that the military who has the hardware that is the best maintained and most ready usually wins, particularly in naval combat. I come from a Navy background, right? In
Okay.
naval combat, the person with the best maintained ships who can sustain combat operations at sea for the longest because their logistics, maintenance, and supply chain are the best actually usually win a naval conflict when the technological parity of them and their adversary are near peers, right?
Okay.
So what does that mean? It means that AI that can help navies and military forces in general maintain and plan maintenance and execute maintenance and supply chain optimization will probably win warfare, particularly if it's a sustained and protracted war, which most
Okay.
tend to be, right?
Okay. Makes sense.
So that means there's a huge market for artificial intelligence to run machines better. And not coincidentally, that's great for the planet too, because that makes the dual purpose use of those machines to maintain critical infrastructure better. So think about a power plant that can be run on lower resources because you're optimizing which generators are online and offline on the grid. Now you've got a lower petroleum use which is, inherently good for the environment. We have a lot of people on the planet. I mean, there's 8 billion people on the planet. We're starting to see resource competition as a incentive for conflict, actually. Anything that we can do to make the industrial layer of civilization more efficient so we can get more outputs for less resource inputs is a net good for humanity. And it just so happens that the AI incentives for the Department of Defense are aligned to those and don't have a profit motive behind them. They have a national security motive behind them.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what you're saying is that's the incentive for all the governments around the world, and all of them see it in the same way. And
No,
I'm not sure.
well, nobody does. That's true, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you just need one enemy to start with, a Terminator for a combat. So just having more robot soldiers, you just need one. And it doesn't matter what you say more than that. It's like you need to have the same baseline. You can't say, okay, it's like this is what they're doing. We don't really care. And I think that I was in one of the Boston Dynamics shows. Like it was a big conference, and they came with these robots, and they're very impressive, right? And they mentioned that they're very far from it. But if I'm not mistaken, it was a few years back, like 3 years back. But now I think that I saw that OpenAI mentioned that they have some kind of agreements with defense systems, and I know if it's armies or not, but defense systems companies. So maybe it will be different. I don't know.
The physical dynamics of the physicality. So let's just call it the motion control, right? We've had motion control robotics has been an important field of study. What Boston Dynamics and a couple other companies have been able to do with humanoid robots is just mind blowing, right?
Right.
Because replication of like human physicality perspective,
right?
And there's a wonderful company here in Austin, Texas, where we're from, that is building hospital robots. Because we, as populations age, there's a lot of jobs that are just like not fun jobs, the dull, dangerous jobs in hospitals, whether it's, taking out bedpans or just cleaning floors, right? Where humanoid robots are the ideal solution, because hospitals are built for people, like the entire built world is built for people to run. So humanoid robots give us the promise of being able to deploy new support systems into those environments. And so humanoid robots are the answer for that. So that's where physicality and humanoid robots actually have the potential to take on a lot of roles that people don't typically like to do, to free up the people to do other roles, and there's a labor shortage. So the humanoid robots, I think, are an inherent, like any other technology, are a technology that can be used for multiple purposes. And then you have the second question is, can I have a humanoid robot that has the sensing and decision-making capability of a soldier? Right. And the answer right now is you're a long, long way from that. And the second caveat to that is another, what I would say, feature of defense. Right. We are very, very concerned, particularly in the United States, because we have very strongly formed legal and ethical boundaries around the application of force on what is called V&V, verification and validation. And so a second feature of the defense market that I'm optimistic about, in addition to machinery optimization and the potential dual use benefits of humanoid robots, is establishment of standards for V&V that we don't see in the commercial space right now. So if you ask OpenAI, what are you doing to make ChatGPT safe? Well, they have their list. And then if you ask Anthropic, they have their list, and Google has their list, right? So everybody has their own list, and they're not going to put anything on their list that prevents them from releasing the software.
For sure.
Right? The only things on their list, right? The only things on their list, gimme, are the softballs that they know they're going to pass, right?
It's kind of funny, because when they talk to Sam Altman, he says that he's very worried about the consequences and what it could do. And of course, it could be very good, but still, there is this option of not going in the right direction, and he's very aware of it. And I think that he even mentioned the book of Oppenheimer, who said that he is regretting doing what he's done. So he is aware of this option, but I didn't see anything in OpenAI's policy preventing anything from being built. Even the
That's right.
opposite, he said that it needs to be built in all costs, like more than 50, 60 billion, doesn't matter, we should do it because it could be good for humanity.
It could be good. Yeah, I find that to be irresponsible, quite frankly. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's another kind of what I would say feature of the defense market. The defense market has strenuous, rigorous verification and validation procedures for everything, right? If we're buying a fighter jet, someone's going to build it, and then the government is going to get it, and an independent test group is going to run it through a set of standards that it has to meet in order to be, mission effective and safe for the pilot who's going to fly it. AI is not going to change that about the defense culture. There will be an independent third-party verification and validation group that is going to be testing any algorithms that are used in this context, right? And
Yeah.
so again, I think over the next decade, as those groups figure out, hey, how do we do V&V on algorithms? Those methodologies are going to be public. Will all of the algorithms the Department of Defense uses going to be public? No, of course not.
No.
But the methodology and the ways in which we do verification and validation and ensure safety, those are going to be public. And I think, and they're a vital contribution to this growing discussion about AI ethics. And whereas on the other side, the commercial AI companies are probably not going to make any of their verification and validation public because the tests that they fail are exactly what their competitors will say they're better at.
Sure. In general, I think that you see in the commercial market that there is no implication. You just mentioned social media and customized ads and campaigns, and we already know that there is lots of harm with social media, and I don't know anything that was done legally, commercially, regulations to do something with it.
Yeah, I would say the most talked about and least done thing in the world right now across every nation is regulating social media. There are incremental steps in various places, but nothing comprehensive.
Yeah, it's really intriguing because we already know that for so long. We know that. And still, you see, Zuckerberg going to the Senate and they're asking these, kind of stupid questions, and that's it. That's what is done. So I'm just thinking about, Sam Altman saying that and saying, okay, so he's done something and they've already proved the consequences. So maybe I could do whatever I want because there will not be any consequences, especially for me. Maybe for humanity, but not for me personally. So why not? So I could dream very to the long distance, I guess.
Yeah. Let me give you an example, like a really practical example of this, and everybody's talking about it, right? There are these horrible fires going on right now in Southern California. There have been California wildfires that have made the news for decades. This fire burning LA is may end up being the most destructive in generations. If you look at a satellite map, the mapping app of your choice, right? And you actually look at Camp Pendleton, which is the big Marine Corps base on the coast in Southern California. Mm-hmm. From a satellite map, what you'll see is suburban sprawl for 100 miles from LA down to San Diego, all the way down to the border, with one exception, which is Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton, where it's actually just still dunes and grasslands, and the Marine Corps has done an overall outstanding job of environmental preservation of the California coastline as urban sprawl compressed lots of native species into that one area. And does every Marine with a rifle actually care about the snowy plover? No. Young Marines don't really care about snowy plovers in general, right? No. But because it's federally mandated land, federally owned and federally operated land, the ability to enforce environmental protection was effective in Camp Pendleton, whereas you would, on the counterpoint, say that the California legislature is probably pretty favorable to environmental protection. But when you look at it from a satellite, they weren't able to make a change because every inch of developable coastal real estate in California has a house on it from LA to the border, right?
Yeah.
So in that same mindset, as the Department of Defense develops verification and validation procedures, they're going to be held accountable to them, just like the Marines got held accountable to environmental protection procedure. And how we end up doing that could be very useful for the world at large about how to run a rigorous, thoughtful set of standards for verifying safety and effectiveness of algorithms in general.
Makes sense. So what are the biggest advantages and challenges of using AI in defense?
The biggest advantage by far is generating the tools that can get through all of the data. And then you've got multiple domains of data. So our early experience with the Navy is right along the lines we talked about earlier. It is generating predictive maintenance recommendations for sailors. As the engineering equipment, that makes the lights and makes the power and the propulsion and the air conditioning and all the other things that allow hundreds or thousands of sailors to be on a ship, takes a lot of sophisticated engineering. Those engineering assets continue to get more complex, and so maintenance on them is harder. I like to joke around, opening the hood of my grandfather's truck and opening the hood of my son's truck, it ain't the same.
No,
right?
It's not.
And
my husband is a mechanic, so he always tell me. Yeah, he is. He always tells me like the electricity part is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It is like more like the essence of a car is more a computer than anything else. Although it needs the wheels and everything, it needs to move. But and you need to know something which is very, very different from, like 50 years ago.
That's right. And so, in order to help our sailors understand how to maintain these very, very sophisticated machines, we've developed a predictive maintenance platform which third-party analytics run and make maintenance predictions for the Navy about how to better maintain and take care of their systems, right? And so it's right in line with, our core thesis of the company, which is about brilliant machines, which are machines that are safer, more resilient against cyber attack, and are optimized for reliability and lower resource inputs. That makes that's a brilliant machine for us, right?
Yeah.
A machine that you can trust, that's going to do what you wanted it to do, and big important port only what you wanted it to do.
Yeah.
And so we think
the challenges are only in security, in cybersecurity, or there are other challenges if you're working in defense systems?
So that's a great question, and the question goes after kind of something we talked about a minute ago. What we're going for are advanced systems that have increased cyber resiliency baked into their core design, as opposed to cyber added on top. Right? So for us, brilliant machines are more cyber resilient. They are more difficult to compromise in the first place, and they're easier to restore after a compromise because of just some core fundamental principles and how they're engineered. And we've got several patents around, machines and some for secure machinery controllers that go after that. And then what we're doing kind of in the AI space is more about optimized use for those machines. How to have those machines more available for more time at less cost and use their input resources, which are usually fuel, better.
And when you're building it, is it like custom tailored into a specific ship, or you could take it to other ships, or you need to fix or to really tailor it like as a project to each one of these?
Yeah. So we're at the beginning of this, and this is why this is pretty exciting. So for the last few years, we've really focused on building a platform that could take in sensor data from lots and lots of different equipment, and then have a very rigorous cybersecurity boundary between actually communicating with the equipment and running the AI. And so we've come through that, and we now have all that data and doing all the hard things in AI, and having done a ton of AI projects for the last 10 plus years, I always find the algorithms get people really excited. The hard work is getting the data right.
The data.
Is in the data engineering, yeah?
Yeah, and cleaning the data and aligning the data and all that. But is it like could you use the same software, to use it in manufacturers or defense manufacturers?
We hope so. We think, going back to our macro level vision, right? We believe that the Department of Defense's willingness to invest in better machinery controls, because it grants a national security benefit. A couple of years into this journey, we're very optimistic that we can take what's working for the Navy and run power plants, factories, and water purification plants, and food processing plants in a way that they're more resilient and better optimized as well.
So if we're going from the defense domain into other domains, and we have managers and leaders like listening to that, what would you say are the most significant cybersecurity threats facing systems and organizations today?
Across all of that space, it's two things. It is, I'm gonna give one kind of business case challenge, and then I'll circle back to the cyber challenge. I don't think the cyber challenge is the most expensive one. The most important thing is the business case challenge. Every machine maker, so whether you're a machine maker that makes wine corking machines, or whether you're a machine maker that makes, air conditioning or anything else, every machine maker would like to sell software to, right? The software companies, from the CEO's chair, have great margin. Because once you develop that software and you sell it for an annual licensing fee, now you have this annual recurring revenue model that generates top valuations for your stock, right? So all of these companies in the industrial sector would love to have a high margin software business on top of their modestly margined, hardware business building whatever machine they make. So they all have a service package where they want to sell you the software that does their machinery prediction, optimization, whatever. And I don't know what brand car your husband's a mechanic for, but every brand of car has a scanner that plugs into the OBD2 port, and you can get the basic codes off anybody's scanner. But if you want the brand name one, you got to buy their brand name scanner, right?
Right.
So the biggest business case challenge for deploying AI over the next 10 years will be having access to a software platform that you buy once, where any of those analytic vendors can run on top of that platform. So if you think about the cloud, for example, if you AWS, Google, Azure, it doesn't matter, right? You can get it. You can rent a virtual machine in any of those cloud environments, and then let's just take a database, the Postgres database, just the most modern, simple, open source database. You can run Postgres on any one of those cloud providers, right? Because they all provide a common interface to run that database in the cloud.
Right.
In order to bring AI into the entire industrial sector, there needs to be a common software platform that could run analytics from Siemens, Rockwell, GE, Caterpillar, or anybody else who's building your machine. And that's absent right now. So that's the biggest business case challenge, is a platform where anyone's analytic can run. And you can compare two vendors against each other. Buy a license for each and compare one factory and one in the other factory, and then double down for a global deployment.
Right.
So that's the biggest business case challenge. The biggest cybersecurity challenge is having a sophisticated security strategy for a hybrid cloud environment, which is a lot of fancy words for saying some tools should probably run in your plant or on your ship or in your factory, right? Some software should probably run in the cloud. And it's very difficult to imagine any modern architecture that doesn't have some hybrid cloud component in it.
For sure.
And so having a sophisticated cybersecurity strategy for how to protect your hybrid cloud environment is fundamental to this future.
So what's your vision for the future of AI in defense and the industrial sector?
So our vision is to be early in developing that common platform that we talked about that implements that cybersecurity vision. So we think, this space is huge. There's enough room in this space for tons of companies to be successful. We're going to try and be successful in the AI infrastructure space, providing a platform that all those algorithms can run on, vertically securing the platform for your on-prem deployment so that it is hardened and cyber resilient, and then making the communication between the platform in the cloud and your assets on-prem also locked down and ready for the future. We call that offering Tempest OS, and it's primarily targeted right now at those defense use cases we talked about. And we're going to build traction and market share in the defense space, and then roll it out for critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I see. So we're almost done. I have only
Yeah.
one last question. So what would be your number one tip for leaders today?
That's tricky. Political leaders, global leaders, business
No,
leaders.
I thought about business leaders, but
Yeah.
you could go for political leaders if you.
Yeah, maybe I'll keep my hand off that one. There's a lot of churn going on.
It's too much.
Actually, if my uh I think it would be the same, actually, now that I'm thinking about it a second. I didn't prep for this one, so it's a good question. Learn about, like, a little bit about the core ways in which these things work, these new technologies work. Aversion to the technology in government is going to prevent the creation of good policy, like we talked about with social media. Aversion of the technology in the business sector is going to miss opportunity because these optimizers can reduce cost, increase efficiency, and make money. And if your competitors are doing it and you're not, that'll show up in your valuation. So aversion is not the answer. And usually on the business side, the risk of moving forward is held back by a lack of understanding and understanding how to calculate the true return on investment. And in the business side, the lack of knowledge about how these things work is preventing the creation of good policy. So I think leaders both in business and in politics need to have the courage to learn, and it's okay to not know how something works and still be in charge, and have both the political and moral courage to say, hey, tell me how this works so I can do my job better.
Yeah. If we're thinking about leaders in general, I don't think that they have the privilege of not knowing that, because it's going to be so crucial for humanity and for countries and in defense too. So if you're not aware of the capacities of AI and what could be impacted and what could be the future in 5 or maybe 10 years, it's like you have to know it. And I think it goes when you're I'm agreeing with you, because it's the same thing for business leaders, right? It's like if you want to keep your business sustainable and successful, you need to be aware that these are the capabilities that your competitors, large or small, could have, and you need to know that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, courageous leadership is not prevalent, I think, a lot of the time.
I didn't meet it yet.
So let's let that be the thing that we're optimistic about, is that the potential for positive change inspires leaders on both politics and business to ask hard questions and really learn how these things work.
Yeah. And okay, so thank you, Zac, for your time. It's been so valuable and really fun to talk to you. Where could people hear more about your work and about your company and contact you?
Yeah, so Fathom5.com. You can search any search engine, find us at Fathom5, LinkedIn, Fathom5. Best way to follow us is through LinkedIn.
Thank you. I see my dog is like, yeah, it's like an hour. That's it. Because my son gave her the food right there, and she's like waiting. Okay, and to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining us. I'll invite you to sign up to my new online leadership program, Unlocking the Power of Generative AI. And I'll see you next week with another innovative insight talk. Thanks, Zac.
Thank you, Addie.
Bye-bye.